My EV pulled into the charging station just outside a town called Derry. At least, that's what the old map said. Whatever had been there wasn't there anymore, and hadn't been for years. Only three buildings were left standing. Everything else was in ruins. Well, that was good news. Once I got back within range of the network, I could tell the company the area was clear and ready to develop. Luckily, one of the structures that remained was an old charging station. I wondered how long it had been there before the town went belly up. Probably not long, as it was the only thing left that wasn't totally degraded, though judging by the look of it, it was still at least a century old. It was quaint looking, some kind of conversion of the old gas pumping stations retrofitted to the standard electric charging ports. I had to hope it was still drawing power from the national grid. If not, I was screwed. 10% charge. Please route to the nearest station. A warning pinged for the third time in the left corner of my heads-up display. I pulled my EV onto the pad and waited for the green light and familiar ping. Charge, I said. Nothing. Please start charging? Not even a peep. I couldn't believe it. I actually had to get out. With a sigh, I opened the door and ventured into the elements. My display went crazy. A UV radiation warning from the harsh sun, air quality from the heavy dust, a high temperature bell, and worst of all, a no network detected signal. Out here, I was exposed and apparently completely alone. I looked down into the valley, hoping to see some semblance of civilization, but other than some trees clumped near a dry riverbed, was nothing but desert. This area was designated red, which wasn't ideal, but still indicated the possibility of human life. It looked like a wasteland to me. Could people really live out here? A low rumble sounded in the air, growing into the loud roar of a gasoline engine. In the distance, I saw a car materialize on the horizon. My interface scanned the vehicle and a readout appeared in front of me. It was a 1967 Mustang Cobra, a type of American muscle car. Locals could be trouble. I started to get back in my EV, but where could I go? At 10%, I could make it maybe 60 miles. I sighed. Well, maybe they could help. The car pulled up directly beside me, its tinted windows too dark to see anything until two men finally got out. The system immediately gave a blaring alert for a weapon. Great. One of them was carrying a shotgun. Hey, Synth, what you doing here? I tapped a small panel under my right wrist. A charge flowed through me. If they attacked, I'd be ready. I'm just doing some mapping of a former town called Derry, I said. I'm a rep from Hologen. It's all official. I tapped another button on my wrist and a hologram of approval orders flashed in front of me. The taller of the two men smiled at me and stuck his gun right through it, placing the barrel against my chest. Is that right? He looked at his partner, who patted the trunk of my car. That wasn't good. Look, I'm not here to make any trouble. You're locals, right? I've got a message. It's good news. The man shook his head and pointed the gun at my face. And what if we don't want any good news? I smirked. The gun was nothing, not against my armor. You can't intimidate me. That won't work, I said. He ignored me. You find it? He said, turning to his partner. The other man nodded. With a strange grin, he bent down and pushed a button hidden on the panel buried in the sand a few feet from the charging port. I heard a hum of electricity, and a moment later the Wemco logo on the top of the pump lit up. The green ready for use indicator displayed brightly. Sorry, Synth, said the gunman. He pulled the trigger. I felt a strong pressure on my chest as the shotgun erupted. The impact didn't cause any damage, but it pushed me back into the pump. I immediately kicked the man in the chest, launching him into the side of my car. I turned to take care of his partner, but he was a little too fast, managing to jam the plug from the station into the charging port, not on my car, but on my leg. My body seized from the surge of power, and I fell to the ground. Hurry, said the gunman. His partner squatted over me, pulling out a microscope and a knife. He plunged the blade into my chest and quickly pulled it out. It came out clean, no blood. Damn it, where'd they put it? He said. He jammed the blade into my right side. This time he pulled it out, and it was stained with a small amount of green blood. That's what I need, he said. I struggled to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I kept getting an error message. No choice. I initiated a system restart. It would take at least a minute. The man with the shotgun walked over and crouched beside his partner, clutching his chest. Can you do it? He asked. Not to worry. The smaller man removed a glass slide from his pocket. He dabbed it with the blade, placing a single drop of my blood on it. With practiced speed, he placed the sample onto the microscope. 30 seconds, read the timer on my display. Almost there. Got it, cried the man. He pressed a button on the side of his machine, and I saw a slide turn a familiar shade of blue. That wasn't just any microscope. It was a key coder. No, if they had the key. The man with the shotgun took the slide and ran to the trunk. I heard the automatic lock click open, responding to it. The heavily armored cover slid away. Restart complete. User ready, said a pleasant voice only I could hear. I sprang to my feet, pushing the smaller man off me, and made my way for the back of the car. Whoa, buddy, you stop right there. This'll be a really bad day for you. His gun was pointed at the contents inside. I looked into the trunk. There, sleeping peacefully, was my real body, the flesh and blood sack of meat that held my mind. Now you got a choice to make, said the gunman. You can turn off that damnable machine you're piloting, or I can end you right here. I stared at him through the glint of the sun. He was 4 meters away. That was too far. There was an 86% chance he could react before I could disable him. If he pulled the trigger, that would be it. Look, I'll leave. I'll just be on my way. How about it? The man smiled. It seemed genuine, maybe even a little sad. Nope, no, I don't think that'll work, he said. We gotta get going, Raj, he said to his partner. He nodded and held the gun to the head of my body. One, two, the interface gave him a 94% chance of pulling the trigger. Three, I cut the link and fell into blackness. I woke up to something I had never felt before. What was this feeling? Intense, throbbing. God, it was awful. Was this pain? What happened to me? I said. My voice came out cracked and gravelly. It was deeper than I remembered. Easy now, said a woman's voice. You haven't used your body in a while. Gotta figure there's gonna be some aches and pains. I opened my eyes and a searing light entered. It was so bright. I slowly sat up and tried to shake the cobwebs away. I'd forgotten how heavy a real body was. Inside my head, I felt the absence of the interface. This was the first time I'd ever been completely disconnected. It felt incredibly lonely. So you're from that company? Asked the woman. She was sitting to my right, a bit squat, her wrinkled face almost like leather. It, it's so quiet, I said. She placed a frail hand on my head. You don't look like them, you know. It's your eyes. I can see light in them. I didn't understand what she meant, but something in her tone put me at ease. I couldn't be sure, but I didn't think she meant me any harm. We should get you settled, she said. What do you— Shh, she interrupted like a mother talking to a child. Follow me. She opened a door and I stumbled after her into another room. This one was much larger. The floor was tatami, and in the middle were four wooden columns, each several meters around. On the far wall was an elaborate shrine. I recognized a statue of Buddha, a Christian cross, a crescent of Islam, and several Hindu gods. They were placed among countless other ornaments that I didn't recognize. What, what is the— Shh, she said again, this time a bit more forceful. This is a holy place. She squatted down on her knees and clapped her hands together and made a deep, solemn bow. For several seconds she remained that way, completely silent. What was she doing? Whatever the strange ritual was, I could tell by her strained brow that she was putting a lot of effort into it. Finally, she opened her eyes and turned back to me. Feels good, doesn't it? I always feel lighter after coming here. I frowned. The only thing I felt was uncomfortable. Look, I don't mean you people any harm. I came with an offer from Halogen. After 10 years, we're finally ready to start developing the remaining outer areas, completely free of charge, of course. The woman sighed and pulled a bell from her pocket. She gave it a sharp shake, and on the very first ring, the man with the shotgun from earlier came in through one of the side doors. How's he look, Miss Sanby? She scratched her chin, eyes suddenly stern and serious. Hard to say. He's not a total loss. We'll let him rest tonight. We'll decide tomorrow. I was led out of the shrine and found myself in the heart of a town. There was a long street lined with several small shops and that looked like some sort of market, something I would see in one of the historical MMORPGs that were all the rage recently. Surrounding this were large areas of parks, full of trees and manicured gardens. It was beautiful. How far had they taken me? Where was the desert? Just how long had I been out? As we walked, I saw several of the townsfolk. Some smiled at me. Others pretended I wasn't there. If it weren't for the man with the shotgun, I might have even enjoyed exploring. Raj, my captor, led me toward a horse and carriage parked on a side street. I marveled at the animal, having only ever seen one in simulations. There was something powerful, something inspiring about seeing the real thing. He must have seen my surprise because he wore a strange smile on his face as he helped me step up to my seat. He mounted the reins, and with a quick flick of his wrist, we were moving. You're the first synth come out this far in nearly 20 years, Raj said. I think I made a mistake. He laughed and shook his head. Me too. I really don't mean any harm to you people. Halogen is a good company, I said. Raj just kept his eyes forward. Uh-huh. Whatever you say, synth. Just like that, we were strangers again. We rode to the edge of town and stopped at a small house. Well, this is you, he said. He started to pull away. Hey, aren't you going to guard me? He laughed. Ain't no need. I watched in disbelief as he rode away. I looked beyond the house to the fields surrounding the town and thought about making a run for it, but then I felt a small warm hand take my own. Aren't you going to come inside? A small boy, probably about 8, was attached to the hand, looking up at me with wide, curious eyes. He wasn't the slightest bit afraid. He pulled me toward the house, and this action filled me with the strangest sensation, one of comfort and longing. It reminded me of my son, Jansen. He was waiting for me back in the stream. Before I knew it, the boy led me past the front gate and into the house. Welcome, said a woman's voice. She stood in the entryway, a warm smile on her face, exactly like the boy. She had long black hair that trailed down to her waist. It was braided neatly in such a way that she seemed both old and young at the same time. She wore an authentic silk kimono with beautiful patterns of what looked to be nature scenes and even a small dragon on one of the sleeves. I'm sorry to intrude on you, I stammered, not knowing what to say. She gave a warm smile. Not at all, she said. This house has always been host to lost souls. I don't know why, but I felt my cheeks flush. I've never seen a real silk like that before. She laughed. It was my great-great-grandmother's. But come, I'll take you to your room. Both she and the boy led me to a small bedroom at the back of the house. Inside was a simple writing desk, a single bed, and on the far wall, a window. Get some rest, she said. Your body needs to adjust. What are you going to do with me? I asked. She smiled again. That depends on you. The boy looked up at her and closed the door. He's a real synth, isn't he? This is so cool. I've never seen one, but their voices died down to a soft murmur. Silence quickly filled the room. I collapsed on the bed. My legs were exhausted. Even with the system shocking my muscles daily, it obviously hadn't been enough to prevent atrophy. I looked out the window. A steady rain had begun to fall, heralding a summer storm. Raj was right. I wouldn't be going anywhere. Not tonight, anyway. Damn it, I said. How the hell did this happen? I kicked the wall in disgust, and off the desk fell a small book. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. The title read Fahrenheit 451. I stared at it. It was my first time seeing a real book. In the stream, they weren't banned or anything, not the words or ideas, but physical objects themselves, unless absolutely necessary, were. I took it into my hands. Even thought about opening it, but exhaustion won out and I laid back into the soft covers instead. They were so soft. In fact, they were so soft it shocked me. It was the softest bed I'd ever been in. I closed my eyes and tried to rest. In moments, my mind was filled. My wife, Myrna, Jansen, their faces. This followed with the thought of death, of thousands of different executions probably awaiting me. The worries piled on top of each other, one after the other, a loud, inescapable chorus. My eyes shot open and I held up the book. No, it was better than nothing. I'd already played this story in the stream as a boy. As I recalled, it was kind of boring. Even playing in first person, actually feeling the approximate feelings of the characters, it hadn't made much of an impression. I mean, the torture scene had been a little fun, but not much else. This was different. Like a man dying of thirst given his first drop of fresh water, my mind demanded any distraction from the heavy silence. I opened the cover and desperately made my way through the maze of words. Even with the motivation, it wasn't easy. It was such a primitive format, hard to focus on, difficult to understand. I didn't really understand the words even. I was far too exhausted for that. But something about the process, like working a muscle I had never used, helped quiet the mind. I'm not sure how long I read, perhaps only minutes, but sleep came quickly. It's time to wake up, said the woman. She peeked her head in the room. They're asking for you. The meeting will be in a few hours, but I thought you might want some breakfast. I watched as she laid my clothes just inside the door. My heart leapt. Those were my actual clothes, the extra sets that my synth usually wore. As soon as the door shut, I was out of the bed. I grabbed the pants and turned to the back pocket. I felt along the seam, and there was a familiar strip of metal. I was saved. I slowly slid it out. I had to be careful. It was so delicate that a strong jerk would tear it to pieces. It took a full minute of careful adjustments before I finally worked it free. I felt hope rising in my chest. Tears of joy welled up in my eyes. I gently pressed and held the top end. A green searchlight began flashing. Moments later, it went dead. Damn. I was out of range. That or my EV had been destroyed when they moved it. What you doing? The voice startled me. I looked behind me and found the boy standing there. He was in the doorway, the same wide, curious grin on his face as before. I immediately grabbed the book. I was just doing a bit of reading. I held it up and waved it at him. He gave a nod of amazement. I tried that one once, he said, his eyes downcast. It was too hard for me. I pushed him out of the room as I started to dress, careful to tuck the receiver in the middle of the book. If we have time later, maybe I'll read it for you. He seemed really excited at this idea and stood patiently outside the door until I finished dressing. He took me by the hand the instant I opened the door, smiling obliviously as he led me down the hall to the music of kitchen utensils and sizzling meat. As I sat down at the table, my stomach called to me, seeing the feast the boy's mother had prepared. Eggs, bacon, pancakes, custard-filled pies, everything looked delicious. What struck me most, though, was the smell. While most of the food looked familiar, the smell was something unexpected. The eggs especially were pleasant, but completely different from those in the stream. I sat down at the table, and I was suddenly taken by the feeling of the coarse wood grain against my skin. The pressure of the smooth, rough textures blended together, slightly tickling and pricking in the most wonderful sensation. Even the dusty air in the old house had its own vivid appeal. The woman sat down across from me, the boy between us. She gave an uncomfortable smile and nodded to the child. He took my hand, and she took his. They closed their eyes and bowed their heads, and not knowing what else to do, I followed. Thank you for this meal, she said, for the love in this house, for the day ahead. And don't forget our guest, added the boy. The woman opened her eyes and looked at me. Yes, of course, and thank you for Mr. Smith, I said quickly. My name is James Smith. The boy opened an eye from his prayer. What are your names? I asked. Axel, said the boy. And I'm Emma, said the woman. For the first time since coming to town, I felt relaxed. Emma shook her head as Axel dived straight into the plate of biscuits. Well, Mr. Smith, she said, suppressing a laugh. Shall we? I tasted a bit of everything, cream tarts, salted bacon, homemade gravy. It wasn't anything I hadn't seen before, but the flavors, their depth, the nuance of them, they were so real. But why? How could the stream have gotten so many things wrong? The thought worried me. The stream was supposed to enhance life, but if anything, in some cases it was a pale imitation, at least compared to this. This place was strange indeed. Everything felt just a little different, a hair deeper, somehow sharper. There was a wonderful kind of pain mixed into the pleasure of this experience. There was a knock on the door. A moment later, Raj, the man with the shotgun, stood in the kitchen entryway. Are you ready? He asked. Honestly, Raj, said Emma, must you bring that weapon in the house? He shrugged. I mustn't do anything. I just like it, all right? We all climbed into the carriage. The boy sat in the back next to me. So, how was your first night unplugged, Synth? Asked Raj. His name is James, said the boy. He had a great time at our house, read all night, didn't you? The man laughed, and even Emma smiled. Got yourself a new friend, huh? Well, maybe this new friend could read to all of us, help pass the time. The boy looked into my eyes, and a wide, naive smile spread over his face. Really? You wouldn't mind, would you? Said the boy. I sighed and pulled the book from my back pocket. At first I read just to humor them, but then the strangest things started to happen. Unlike the night before, when I only found lifeless text, this time, after the first few lines, images started to appear in my mind's eye. A story started to come to life in my head. I saw a group of men gathered in a circle, throwing books into a roaring fire. They laughed with crazed glee as they danced around, happy in their destructive ignorance. Suddenly, I was filled with an overwhelming sense of loss as we rode, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was from the book, or had it simply brought out something that was buried inside me all along. Here we are, said Raj as he pulled up to the side of the building. I looked up from the book in disbelief. Were we there already? Raj stepped down first, followed by Emma and Axel. As they exited the carriage, I carefully slid my fingers along the seam of the back page of the book and took the receiver strip and tucked it behind my fingers. Emma and Axel walked with me into the building. The main room, the one with all the religious figures, now was filled with people. I couldn't be sure, but my guess was that the whole town had gathered. The old woman stepped forward, raising her arms, quieting the crowd. She stood near the entrance in the center of the statues. There was an altar, and laid upon it was my synthetic body. Everyone, my sons, my daughters, my friends, thank you for coming in this delicate time. Everyone's eyes turned to me, and my hand nervously went into my pocket, where I thumbed the receiver. This man has come from the other world. We are here today to make a choice, and as always, we will make that choice as a family. Recognizing some cue I couldn't pick up on, the whole group bowed their heads, and just as I'd seen Emma and Axel at the table, they were silent for a time. When they raised their heads, the old woman looked at me, a stern expression on her face. She held out her hand, and all eyes turned to me. Now is your time to speak, she said. Tell us, young man, why have you come? I looked around the room and immediately felt the weight of everyone's gaze. I have great news, I stammered. You all know Halogen. I've come on their behalf. Even before I continued, I could already feel the emptiness in my words. They want to bring you guys in. You can join the stream. It's completely free, of course. Part of the World Network Initiative. A deeper, enhanced life for all. I swallowed, a strange disgust filling my chest. Halogen, it's better than real life, I croaked out. It's a free life. Silence followed. The idea of jacking into the stream, for all its advantages, suddenly felt artificial and cheap, even to me. Is this all you have to say? Asked the old matriarch. I nodded sheepishly. I honestly couldn't think of anything else. Would anyone else like to speak? No one said a word, but Emma gave me a small smile. Axel was nowhere to be found. I felt a cold fear enter my stomach. There you have it, said the old matriarch. We have two ways to deal with this. We can join them, or we will use our method. Let us vote. Hey, I said, just let me go home. I swear I won't tell anyone about this place. The woman gave a solemn nod but said nothing. All around me, I heard people scratching on small pieces of paper. I closed my eyes and held the receiver in my fingers, pressing it over and over. Please, please let this work. I pressed it once more, and a second later, there was a crash. The wall on the northeast corner caved in. I dived to the floor and covered my head as the crowd broke into a chaos of screams and people running for cover. When the dust cleared, I saw my EV, doors open, side panels lit and ready. Most importantly, the trunk was open. Through the crowd, I made contact with Raj. We looked at each other and then to the EV. We bolted toward the vehicle at the same time. Stop! Stop him! He shouted. I froze. I would have kept running, but the whistle of shotgun pellets through the air took my courage. I can't let you do it, said Raj. I turned to face him. The hard man I expected was replaced with someone with genuine fear in his eyes. I took a shaky step back toward the trunk of the car. He pulled the trigger. I closed my eyes as the blast rang in my ears. I waited for the pain, and it took a few moments before I opened them and realized he missed. Please, stop, he said. I took another step back. He let out another blast, this one striking the floor beside me. He couldn't do it. I smiled and jumped into the open trunk. The lid shut, and I felt the fibers of the Lazarus sack pulled tight over my body. It only took a few moments for my synth to boot, and I felt my vision shrink to a tiny black point before I felt a new rush of awareness. I opened my eyes, senses enhanced. I stood up, cradled in the palms of the massive statue, and could see every person around me. The computer already gave an estimate on the relative strengths and the likelihood of attack. I'd expected the crowd to rush me in a frenzy, but they just stood there, staring at me. It was as if I was one of the very gods they had been praying to. Even Raj stood passively now, his gun at his side. They must have understood the power of the synthetic. There was nothing they could do now, not with these primitive weapons. The matriarch held up her hand and the crowd parted. Was she letting me go? I smiled. It only took two quick jumps to bound across the room to the EV. I was so relieved at the chance to leave, I nearly hit the side door. Hadn't it been open earlier? You understand, don't you, Synth? Raj called out to me. This is what we chose. I opened the car door and set the navigation for the network edge. I caught sight of Emma as I hopped in the driver's seat. She didn't look afraid or even angry, just a bit sad. It was almost like she pitied me. For the briefest moment, I wondered what they would have done had I stayed. But by then, I was already gone. The town disappeared quickly in the rearview mirror. The readout from my GPS gave no location. I passed several decimated towns, the buildings flattened or, in most cases, simply abandoned and overgrown. I want to go home, said a familiar voice. I almost crashed the car as I turned and saw Axel in the back seat. What the hell are you doing here? The boy cringed and dived to the floor behind the driver's seat. I pulled off and parked near an old dilapidated hospital. I cut the engine and turned to him. I reached out a hand to his cowering form. Axel, it's okay. Stop! Don't you touch me! The boy's eyes were wide with terror. The UI scanned him. His heart rate was nearly 180 beats per minute, eyes fully dilated. As I continued to reach for him, I saw my reflection in the back window. To him, I wasn't James Smith, not with this metal face and glowing yellow eyes. To him, I was something else, a monster. I sighed and leaned back in my seat and pressed a button under the dash. The transition was nearly instant. As soon as the trunk door popped open, I quickly sprinted around the car. Hey, kid, I said, you okay? Mr. Smith, he cried. I thought it was going to kill me. He jumped into my arms and hugged me. Such a simple gesture, and yet that familiar longing in my heart. A strange thought struck me. Jansen, Myrna. I don't think I'd ever held either of them, not outside the stream, not for real. Why did you do this, kid? He looked up at me and carefully pulled out a copy of the book. You left it in the carriage, he said. I took it in my hands and couldn't help but laugh. I used the EV's sensors to scan for other vehicles, just as I thought. We couldn't hear them yet, but there was a small caravan of cars heading this way. No doubt they were searching for the kid. I had to admit, even if they wanted me dead, I liked these people. I placed the book on the dash and turned back to the kid. Axel, I need you to watch something, so you don't have to be afraid, okay? I led him to the trunk and let him watch as I laid down in the pod. Now remember, I might look different, but it's still me. He nodded, and I could tell he wasn't quite sure. I closed the pod door, and in a surge of electricity, I felt myself in the front seat again, the synth that these unplugs feared so much. I moved slowly, deliberately, toward the boy. He cringed at first sight, but quickly became excited once he touched my arm a few times. The rumbling of the vehicles started to echo in the distance. I could wait, hand the boy over in person, so to speak, but that might have meant fighting. I went to the front of the car and raised my fist. With one precise punch, I drove my arm through the dash and ripped out the location scanner. I placed the part in the boy's backpack. This way they wouldn't worry after I was gone. There would be no data of where I'd been, nothing linking me to the town, and I wouldn't tell them where I was coming from. We sat on the bench on the old sidewalk in front of the hospital. Years ago, this would have been a bus stop. Who knows, before that, perhaps it was part of a town full of horses and carriages. I wondered which era really might have been the best. Certainly not this one. You be sure to tell your mom about that scanner. It will warn everyone well in advance if another person like me comes. He nodded. I gave him a light tap on the head and stood up, turning toward the car. Will you come back? He asked. I didn't say anything. Instead, I dropped to my knees as I'd seen the townsfolk doing earlier and bowed my head, staying silent both in body and, perhaps for the first time, in mind. I wasn't completely sure if this was how the ritual was used, but the boy seemed happy. I guess we'll see, I said, but maybe one day. I gave him another pat on the head and without a word, drove away. My batteries died 80 miles from the network border. It was close enough. A drone eventually spotted my car on a routine patrol in mere minutes. Smith 44672, come in. This is Smith 44672 confirming. Zombie 742, do you need assistance? Your last ping was 39 hours ago. Confirm that, Zombie 742. No grid beyond Sector 36.6. No problems to report, but I've lost all charge. This felt good. The language. It was home. Confirm on Dairy Sector. Did you make contact? I looked at the dash, at the book placed there. I'd forgotten to give it back to the boy. Negative, Zombie 742. Dairy site confirmed as abandoned. Radiation levels exceed tolerance for sustainable stream infrastructure. No unplugs. Not suitable for development. Confirmed. Welcome home. I watched the drone turn toward the north, heading in the opposite direction of Dairy. A strange relief filled me. The people would be pulled into the stream one way or another, if only because people, even in that town, would eventually want more. That's what the stream really was. Progress. But until then, until they were ready, I hoped that the town could exist for as long as it could. I looked at the switch button on the dash and, not really knowing why, leaned forward and pressed the button, powering down my synth. The switch to my body was instantaneous. I breathed in the fresh desert air. It felt good, the raw, slightly harsh chill of the evening entering my lungs. I looked out at the horizon to the setting sun. No analysis, no UI. What people must have thought about long ago, with nothing but these wonderful primitive eyes staring out at the world so vast. The open sky was frighteningly big, terribly beautiful. I felt as if it might swallow me up at any moment, and I couldn't decide if I liked it or if it simply scared the hell out of me. It was too much to take in all at once. I laid out on the hood of the EV and held the book up in the dying light. It made sense. No wonder the past was filled with such stories. I suddenly thought about Jansen and Myrna. I wondered what it would be like to see them outside the stream. I wondered if they could be happy in a town like Derry. And then I opened the book and, with what little time I had left, I began to read. The end.